Yes.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I was going to say.
Okay.
You can put your name behind that.
Good morning, everybody. We'll call this meeting to order for the Committee of the Whole for Wednesday, March 8th, 2023. Item number 8, public information notices as required under bylaw or notice bylaw 160 2022. The public is advised of council's intention to adopt the following at its March 22nd, 2023 meeting. Adopt the 2023 municipal operating budget, adopt the 2023 water and wastewater utility budget, and adopt the 2023 solid waste utility budget. So we'll move on the agenda. So the blessing and land acknowledgement, and I'll call on Councillor Burney, please, if everybody could stand.
Thanks, Mr. As we gather, we recognize that we are on Treaty 3 lands which are steeped in rich Indigenous history and home to many First Nations and Métis people today. We continue to be thankful for the partnerships with Indigenous people. We give thanks for the many blessings we enjoy in the city of Kenora. We seek wisdom in our minds, clearness in our thinking, truth in our speaking, and always love in our hearts so that we may try always to unite the citizens of Kenora. Let these principles guide us in our decision making.
Thank you, Councillor. Moving on the agenda, item number B, declaration of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof. On today's agenda from a meeting at which a member was not in attendance, seeing none. Item number C, be resolution number 1.
Thank you, Your Worship. Resolution number 1, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Chase, that the minutes from the last regular committee of the whole meeting held February 8th, 2023, and special committee of the whole meetings held January 30th, February 1st, February 2nd, February 6th, and March 1st, 2023, be confirmed as written and filed.
Thank you. Any discussion? I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. So now I'll call on, before we start with the deputations, I'm just going to call on Councillor Koch, who asked to have a bit of time in the meeting today. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. As you will all likely know, that today is International Women's Day, and I wanted to take an opportunity to speak on that, if you'll indulge me a moment. I would start by inviting you to take a walk downtown. Our small business community is not exclusively, but notably largely made up of women owner-operators. Women are a key driver of our local economy. The support system that exists in our community of women-owned businesses is something that really deserves to be celebrated. Moreover, if I look at other sectors, women are making up significant proportions of bankers, healthcare workers, local government, media, in addition to making up a significant portion of our community's volunteer base. We are emerging from the days where the old boys club ran the town and evolving into something we should be very proud of, and something that women knew all along. We are better together. We can do more and be more when all genders work together and support one another. It is no longer necessary for women to clamor for their voice to be the one permitted to be heard. There's room for all voices. I feel very grateful to be in the positions I am and to have had seats at a number of tables, including this, through my own growth and evolution, though my experience has disappointingly been studded with the voices of women who would shout for equality for all women while their actions would squash those demonstrating high levels of capability and willingness to contribute. It is my goal, and I would venture a goal for each woman sitting here today, to truly empower young people, no matter how they identify, to speak their truth, share their ideas and opinions, and ensure they know there is a place for them wherever they aim to be. And I will endeavor to support and celebrate those who identify as women at every opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Koch. Moving on the agenda, item number D. So we have quite a few deputations this morning. So I'm going to call on Tamara, Howard-Bachinsky, and Blair McCallum from Mount Evergreen Ski Hill. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. I greatly appreciate that, and as well my congratulations to women in this room that have stepped forward to take on leadership roles. I have a funny little story of my mother in council, and she was a big proponent of recycling in the 70s and 80s. You can imagine the uphill fight she had. And the city of Guelph was dragging their feet in implementing blue box recycling. So my mother got 30 of her friends together, and they filled paper bags with plastic and tin cans, and every time council talked and didn't want to proceed with recycling, they would stand up and shake them. And by the end of the meeting, the city of Guelph had agreed to move forward on recycling, and at one point they did have one of the best recycling programs in Canada. So, okay. Oh, now I have to do 2 things. So thank you very much for your time. Mount Evergreen Ski Club, Thomas Nab is here. Tamara couldn't be here today. She's was recently on a trip out west with doing some skiing with her family, as well as her son Jesse, who's on the Canadian Paralympic team. And in Saskatchewan, they got sideswiped by a car, so she's kind of busy dealing with all that stuff. So, but anyway, we thought we would give the few minutes of our time to update council as to where we are and who we are. So I know many of you from either the ski hill or from my work. I'm also a municipal employee with the water treatment plant. And we just want to give you an update of where we are. So for those who don't know, Mount Evergreen Ski Club is on city-owned land in the 1950s. Cola Miles bought the property and developed the ski hill for himself. Not for himself, for the ski community. But in the 60s, we realized that to move forward with government funding, we couldn't be a lone entity, we had to be a not-for-profit. So we became a registered not-for-profit in the 60s, gifted the land to the city of Kenora. And there is an agreement there, which both sides are desperately trying to find. We're actually probably going to come up with a new agreement at some point in the near future. But basically, the city does own the ski hill legally. So. The board of directors is all volunteer. We have an army of volunteers that help run the facility, and that's how we survive. If we didn't have the volunteers, we couldn't be an entity. We just don't have the funds for it. So moving forward, I pressed the button you told me.
Arrow.
Hang on, let me try. There we go. Okay, right is right. So I won't read off the slides, but I will talk about them a little bit. We do this for the community. We don't do this for us. I don't do this so I can ski. In fact, I ski less than 2 days a year, even though I love it. We do this for recreation and tourism in the city. The main thing we see up front is our kids, our children, our friends' children out there skiing, enjoying themselves, give them something to do on weekends. And there are 2 clubs that run out of this area. So there's Mount Evergreen Ski Club, which is ours. We have control of the land that was originally ours, which is the majority of what you see when you're out there. The clubhouse, all the buildings. There's also the Kenora Nordic and Biathlon Club, KNBC. They are a completely separate club, their own board of directors. They're also volunteer driven as well. They do it for the love of the community as well. So congratulations to them. They have the lit trail system that's going on out there. 3 kilometers so far, total 5, and it's going to be, I mean, it looks great, and it's going to be a pretty good tourism draw out there. So, but they are 2 very separate clubs. So you can see the list of people currently on the board, and there have been tens and tens of other people. Thomas Nat is behind me. He's one of the board members currently. That's one of the new board members. And this picture kind of sums up who we are. Our groomer broke down this year on the hill, blew out all the ATF, and there's 3 volunteers that came out in the morning to basically fix it out on the hill. So hats off to them, and that's what happens every day out at Mount Evergreen. So we comprise about 50% of the city's total parks land, and in the most recent that recreation survey that was done, I guess, I don't know if you guys remember, there was a map and people could go on it, interactive, and click on it and add their comments. So the city was smattered with people making comments, but where it was Mount Evergreen and Kenora Nordic and Biathlon Club, the map was, there wasn't enough room on it. So there are a lot of people in support. So again, with the picture, this is why we do it, the kids. We couldn't survive with just being alpine skiing anymore, so we had to branch out. So we have tubing now, we do facility rentals, and we need to keep growing if we want to survive. So the tourism, so the stats we've collected so far this year is 24% of all day users, so that's people who come up and buy lift tickets for that day, are from outside our community. Most weekends out of town days are around 40%, so this is weekends, with a high value of 70%. That's when we had the Manitoba Alpine Racers out. So they came with about 150 between racers and family, that sort of thing. So it was a big, huge bump for our community. A few years ago, so that's the one I just talked about. And again, with the picture, that's why we do it. And there's Sean Stevenson in the background, one of our very serious ski patrollers, doing what he does best, which is keep people smiling. So a few years ago, we hired consultants to do a 4-season study. We didn't want to just say, we know what's going to work. We wanted someone to professionally analyze our situation. I have provided you, emailed a copy to Heather, who forwarded it to you guys. So you have the complete final draft that came out of it. Essentially what the consultant said is that Mount Evergreen is a jewel in the rough. There's huge development potential there for it. And he's outlaid in that final draft things that have worked in other communities, very similar, things that in his mind could work. One of the big issues is our facility is very run down. So we can operate a facility. We don't have, being a not-for-profit, we can't save and save and save money and bankroll a couple $1 million development. So that's where we require the assistance. And we're going to do it in phases. We don't think we can do it all in one. So the first phase is our new operations center, which we need to house our groomer, because currently our groomer cannot fit inside anywhere. So all work has to happen outside, whether it's in the middle of the hill or even in the summer doing work on it. So it's quite awkward. It's quite hard on the equipment to do that. So operations facility, we also need somewhere to run out of when we finally get the funds to build a new chalet. So the expansion of Mount Evergreen contributes to the city Parks and Recreation program. Huge potential for the city because, once again, you guys own the property. So this is an opportunity for the city to work with us to develop this, to bring in tourists to the area. Josh Nelson and Megan DeCucci have been helping us for about the past 4 or 5 years as we're doing the stages and requesting funding, that sort of thing. So the city has been highly involved with it. The master plan, I'm sure you guys are all well aware of that, but there was a lot of emphasis on the winter tourism and development of the trails and the ski hills. So as people like to say, summer tourism kind of happens here. Winter tourism and the season tourism is very hard to do, and that's where Mount Evergreen can fill that void. So the expansion of Mount Evergreen will also help create a couple full-time jobs in the community, but continue to provide part-time jobs. About 9% of all of our staff are high school kids. So we have a employee number of around 30, 35 people every season. Most of them are part-time, most of them are high school students. So we are a big benefit and economic boost to the city. We are also, there are certain groups with the, and the acronym is eluding me at the moment, that brings in doctors and stuff to the hospital, and the local doctor recruitment program, what's it called? Yeah. They every season rent the chalet for a night and bring recruits out and the new people that have come into town and sort of have fun for them. And there are many people who have come in, doctors, nurses, staff, who say that having a ski hill, having something like that available to them was a big draw for them to come here. So as I said, we do not ever think that we have the answer to everything. So that's why we went with the consultant. He gave us a few phases that we should follow, and that seems to also follow our plan as well. Like I said, we want a new operations center, which we need to make our facility run more smoothly, as well as upkeep of our equipment. We'd also like to purchase a new groomer, update our snowmaking equipment, and update the lighting on the hill. So much of what is at the facility currently is from the 1960s, and it's been slowly upgraded a little bit here and there, but most of it is old. So we are working with, we have put in grant applications with NOHFC and FedNor, and we're working through those and getting those pushed through so that we can do the first phase of development. And we have been able to save some money as a not-for-profit. As I said, we're supposed to be a not-for-profit, but we are able to bankroll money as long as we as long as we stipulate that it's allocated for something. And if that something ever falls through, then we have to spend it on other stuff. So we do have our capital. Up until I became involved with the club around 2005, and up until then it was literally a hand-to-mouth operation. We would end most seasons owing money and get a small loan from the local credit union, which was always wanting to help us out. And then we would pay off our local people that we owed money to, and then make some money on season passes. So over the past 10, 15 years, we've been able to grow the business and have a real good business plan. And we've been able to put some money in the bank. So when we do have hiccups, like 4 years ago when our groomer literally died, we had enough to cobble together to go out and buy a nice, good used groomer. So the future phases of implementation, we'd like to bring in downhill mountain biking trails. I always said, why would people want a downhill mountain bike at Mount Evergreen? But when I talk to the people who actually bike, they go, we really want to do that. So I guess it's all in perspective. We'd like to get a pump track, which is biking and you don't pedal that much, you just kind of pump it. Zip lines, climbing apparatus, and outdoor events, festivals. So there isn't really besides the tent downtown, there's not sort of an area where people can come and have a large event. We've had, for those, I wasn't here when it happened, but they used to have big concerts out at the ski hill. Apparently they were a lot of fun. And people always say, when are you gonna do that again? And I say, I don't know. So we are 60 years old and a little bit older. So a lot of our infrastructure is aging and requires a lot of TLC. And we are in sort of the next phase of needing to upgrade that. We feel that a new chalet, which is sort of our big end goal, would be a huge benefit for both the city as well as for us, because it would be a massive revenue generator as well as a big draw for tourists to come into town. So we're talking special events out there, but mostly weddings, which we've been told if we had a nice facility that had weddings on weekends, it would be packed every weekend. So, that's about it. So we wanted just to give you guys an update as to where we are. We've been growing and we have a plan to move forward. We did put our own money in to hire a consultant to do an independent study, and you guys all have a copy of that. And yeah, moving forward, huge potential for that property, as I said, which the city owns, to make it an integral part of the tourism and recreation plan moving forward. So does anyone have any questions?
Councillor Madsen and then Councillor Van Dam.
Thanks, Your Worship. Blair, I just want to thank you and all your volunteers for all the work you have done out there. I'm not saying I'm one that skis, but I've been out there on many other things, so big congratulations to you and your team.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you as well. So I grew up in Kimberley, BC, which is in the Rocky Mountains, and they've, in the last, I think like 5 to 10 years, have also implemented a mountain biking trail system on our ski hill, and it has had, like, it's gangbusters out there. There's a women's group, there's a youth group, they go through the schools, so it's really cool to see that as part of this feasibility. So I also don't necessarily understand the draw to it, but it seems to be very popular, so thank you.
I was just out in Whistler last week, and I have friends that are well integrated into that facility, and their summer tourism is now eclipsing their winter tourism. So they are now officially less a winter resort and more of a summer resort. So.
Any other questions of council? Oh, Councillor Clark.
Could the bush crawl come back?
Yes. So one of the big issues that we have as a board is we work so hard in the winter. So many of us put in hundreds and hundreds of hours out there, and come summertime, that's when we need a break. So we've actually talked about having essentially two boards, or one large board with two aspects, and one is winter and one is non-winter, I guess non-ski board of directors. But the bush crawl used to be put on by the KACL. So they're actually the ones that ran it. We just gave them use of the facility, and when they weren't able to do it anymore, we did it for a few years, but it is a ton of work. But we would love to bring that back because it showcases what the hill, as well as KMBC, has to offer when the snow is not there. So.
Thanks.
Thanks, Blair, for your informative presentation.
Okay.
Look forward to that partnership moving forward.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for your time, everyone.
So next up on the agenda is Peter Kirby and Doug Orchard on composting project. Welcome, Peter.
Thanks. Thanks very much. Doug is with me. Henry Rasmussen was unable to make it. He has the flu. And I want to acknowledge that one of the spearheads for this project we're trying to get the city involved in is Bill Cameron, Dr. Bill Cameron. Many of you here would know Bill, long-term physician, now retired. He's in Pinecrest, basically taking care of his wife, but I started out with Bill in 2018, and so I'd just like to give a big shout out to Bill. I like to say that the Compost Club is Kenora's smallest club, because actually we don't operate quite like a club. We're more like an interest group, and so we have people who glom on to what we're doing and express interest along the way. In 2018, we did a survey of 21 food outlets and restaurants in Kenora, most of which expressed great enthusiasm to be able to participate in a compost program. Each of the council members and the mayor have the brief we presented, and we made our best efforts to meet with every single candidate running in the last municipal election, and I'm happy to say we met with everyone here except one. We were able to do that. So we gave you a brief, and I'm not going to go through our brief, but I want to say that Doug and I in particular, we've toured sites in Manitoba. We've been to Morden, which has a gangbuster high-tech facility, which probably not a lot of people know about, but in any event, we've been to Winkler, we've been to the Forks, we've been to Seven Oaks School Division, we've been to Brady Landfill, we've been to Prairie Green, we've been to Overton in Richer, which runs a huge commercial composting facility. We've done research, we've done presentations, we've presented to a Treaty 3 climate conference a few years ago. We've gone to schools. We've spoken to anyone who wants to hear what we have to say. I don't know if there's anything in particular I want to emphasize right now, except there's two things. First of all, I want to correct our brief. We said the life of the landfill was 40 years from 1998. I now understand from reading the 2021 municipal solid waste budget that the life of the landfill is estimated as 25 years. But we maintain that if done correctly, a composting project for the whole city, curbside, including schools, the hospital, long-term care homes, all restaurants and food outlets, could result in 40% of organics being diverted from the landfill and increase the life of the landfill by 8 years. We also think this is would provide a tremendous opportunity for Kenora to join with First Nations. And I know from Lac Seul to Dulles, First Nations are looking for solutions for landfill issues. Everyone has a landfill issue, and it has to be dealt with. And you know that to build a new landfill is going to be much, much more costly than the one that was built in the late 1990s. You require leachate containers, and Doug and I visited Brady, and we saw the kind of work that goes into creating a landfill that does not permit leachate to get into the groundwater. It's a fantastic enterprise just to see them do it, but it's also extremely expensive. We provided some information on Kamloops, a city of 90,000, just to give you some background information on what can be done in terms of the feasibility study. And so we're saying to Kenora, okay, let's do what everybody else does. Start with the feasibility study, go into a pilot project, and then a capital project which would do curbside for the whole community. It's amazing what's being done across the country. And by the way, Ontario is thinking of banning communities over 50,000 from putting organics into landfill. Now, of course, that's a bit of a dream at this point, but we know that's the direction that all governments are moving in. Divert organics, and as much as possible from landfills. I mean, we've got a huge greenhouse gas problem. Methane is 25 times more heat trapping than carbon dioxide. So we have an obligation, as Bill Cameron would say, to grandchildren, to future generations to do something. So I think at that point I'm going to stop, and if there's any questions, please go ahead.
Councillor Moncrief?
I do have a question, thank you, Your Worship. So, Mr. Kirby, when we spoke before, we had talked about all the people in Kenora that are already transporting topsoil from Manitoba and companies that have bins already. And I think in your brief, it was the Winkler example where there was a private enterprise that's actually running the compost machinery. Has there been any thought given to a public-private partnership or encouraging a local business to take this on?
I think that's something a feasibility study could explore. I note that the city of Kamloops, and this came as a surprise to me, they did the feasibility study internally. They did not hire a consultant to do it. And my view is that Kenora could do the same thing. But I mean, you could put out feelers to people. I talked to a local landscaper a few years ago, and I know he would appreciate having a source of compost. And there's a small farm going up off the Muriel Lake Road, which you might have heard about, the Jacob Boutwell and Austin Taylor. I mean, they had to import the compost for their fields from Manitoba. I mean, that just shouldn't be, you know? So anyway, it's open, okay? We're not fixed, but one thing I want you to remember about Winkler is that their private contractor does everything, garbage plus composting. So you could hive it off. You could say, as Kamloops does, well, we'll have a private operator do the composting, because Kamloops doesn't do the composting. They take it to a third party. So Kenora could say, well, we'll get a private operator just to do the composting, or we'll get a private operator to do the pickup, delivery, and composting. I mean, again, a feasibility study is going to give you options
Yeah, it seems like
for
an
all of
opportunity.
that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor, do you have a question? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for your time. Thank you.
Next on the agenda, Ken Ames, project on the corner of Sunset Bay and Transmitter Road. There you are. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councillors, and ladies. I really appreciate you just taking your time. This is awesome to see so many of you taking out of your family time to participate in this. It's great. Anyways, I asked for time for two things. I have not heard whether I can put them both on or not.
Go for it.
Yeah.
Okay, the first one. I have two city employees, and in 23 years, the road at Sunset Bay has never been plowed. Never. They come down once or twice a year to move snow. This year, I had a Mr. Dean Lewis. I looked outside, there's this monster grader. We don't usually get a left-hand truck down there to plow. Just phenomenal job this guy did. So, I mean, I'm shocked. Here's a grader flipping around. And we got a cul-de-sac. Don't get me wrong, it's a cul-de-sac. You should be able to turn a semi-trailer around in there. They come down with a little truck up one side, turn around in somebody's yard, back up the same side. So, anyways, the other guy is Mr. J. McDowell. Again, monster truck. Put his wing down, plows it out, gone. Unbelievable. 23 years of fighting with the city, nothing. And this year, I don't know who did it. Maybe I'm hoping it was you guys. Thank you very, very much. It's phenomenal.
We've made some changes to what we're doing out there. I'm going to pass that on to those staff members. Thanks so much for sharing that. Really appreciate it.
Sorry, I have a question. Can you just describe to me where that is?
Sunset Bay Road.
Yes.
Transmitter Road, are you familiar with that?
Yes, yes.
Are you familiar with Lakeside Baptist Church?
Yes.
Right there,
Okay.
yes. Anyways, I'm going to read you something. These are all intelligent people, but I'm reading you something out of the Oxford Dictionary because I don't want anybody to be offended. Okay, the word ignorant or ignorance, it's a lack of knowledge, uninformed, uncouth, and through the lack of knowledge. Okay? I want to put that out there so you know. And so there's the old saying, and again, you can fix ignorance, you can't fix, and I'm going to stop right there, I won't say the other word. But since amalgamation in 1998, and which finally took place in 2000, everybody's got one city. Kenora has lost over 7,000 people. Okay, that's all in Google. You don't have to take my word for it. The last census, 14,992 or somewhere. And the billboard on coming into the city reads 15,300. Census are done every 5 years. 2021, the last one was done. That's what it is. So, taking that into account, I would like to know, and move on to my next thing is, when is the city going to inform the residents of Sunset Bay about the property changes that were done on this lot on the corner, and I'm now talking northeast corner of Sunset Bay and Transmitter Road? We have never been informed about it. In 2021, we were attended 3 council meetings. The first one was to break up the property, and I'm talking all lots there are approximately 1 acre in size. So, this lot was now being chopped up in a 1 acre. I mean, this is, I think, 1.2 or 1. I don't know the exact numbers. It's a little larger than an acre. Being chopped up into 5 tiny lots. Hello, 1 acre chopped into 5 lots? Give me a break. Ridiculous. Anyways, it was all virtual meetings we're attending, right? We have a vote. The mayor calls the vote. Show of hands, those for, those against. Believe it or not, us residents won. But 2 weeks later, I get a phone call saying, oh, by the way, the city's changed mind. You have to come back and we have to have another vote because we didn't do it right. So now my neighbors and I had a talk and said, hello, how can the city flip vote? What goes on with that? So we figured right off the hop, okay, there's something going on. But anyways, next vote, we lost. What gives? Anyways, what are we going to do about it, right? Sorry, I get all excited. And knocking that over. You guys need to fix this. That girl right there tripped twice over that stupid rat. Well, I mean, hey, I wouldn't want to see her break her neck. Anyhow, yeah, I have to find where I am, so give me a minute. I actually think that the mayor runs the show, does he not? He calls the vote, the vote's taken, done, it's a done deal. Somehow they rose the dead. Redo the vote, and we lost. Anyways, it move on to this. This developer now proposes he's going to build 4 tiny houses on this lot, 4 lots. And now hold your breath here, because this is what took place. The city, He had to go to the city now and get the city to bend over for him because he wants to put up 1,000 square foot houses, but the lots are too small to accommodate that. And so now the city is going to adjust the rules of how to build houses for this developer. Doesn't make any sense to me. If he can't build houses, why did the developer put such a thing in to start with? 4 tiny lots. Anyways, move on. The city bends over. They're now going to build 2 condos. Or not condos, I'm sorry, wrong word. What do you call them? Anyways, duplexes is the word. They're going to build 2,000 square foot duplexes. So the next vote comes along. Now we're going to switch this from R1 to R2. What do you think? We already know what's going to happen. We've already lost the vote. They flipped it. So we know we're not even going to stand a chance. Of course, in the city, went along with it. Yep, change it to R2. Immediately, they always said, hello, if you go from R1 to R2, the building is now going to go from 24 feet high to 32 feet tall. Anyways, it went. So now, we don't hear anything more from the city. What do you think goes on September? I shouldn't say August, about the 20th, 2022. We get a knock on my door from KD, I think it's KDH, I don't know what it stands for, housing. And they said, we're going to be your new neighbor. We're putting up a 12,000 square foot building. Hello, what happened to the 2 duplexes that were going up here? 4,000. Now we got 12,000 square. We're talking R1 subdivision here that the city flipped. And so to me, all I've got going here, smoke and mirrors, dog and pony show, lots of flash. And meanwhile, behind the scenes, the city and this developer are screwing us around. Pardon I apologize, but that's the way I see it. So my question is, now I got a city planner. Does this city planner even have is he a city planner by just appointed, or does he actually have credentials? Because everything I see, if I have talked to a lawyer, I get all his LLBs and all the initials behind them. Everybody else, if there are any qualifications, the city planner, I never see anything, and that's why I'm asking the question. Does he have a license? When did he get it? What year? What month? What day? Because it is not making any sense how this project is gone this enormous. And like I said, I look out, hello, a little house. You don't think about the 2,000 square foot house or 12,000 feet. That is a monster. And number 2, they don't do anything. They've destroyed the Sunset Bay Road, destroyed. And I'm talking the first 60 feet because they don't pay any attention to the city. They put entrances into the property. A month and a half after they start, they finally put their own entrances. Meanwhile, they're running all their equipment across Sunset Bay Road. What gives with that? And the city never shows up to do anything. I don't know who inspects, who does it, where's your engineers, where's your city planner, where's the people who look after my interests or the people that we live with. I never see anybody up there. Anyways, there should be culverts, there should be a swale or something. I mean, we're talking 12,000 square feet of building, footprint, 13,200 square feet of roof, a total paved parking area. Where's all this water going? You know, there is nothing being done. It's going to just wash out the south side of the transmitter road and it'll be in the field there. You know, it's pretty sad what's going on there. I mean, anyways, I get excited as I go on here. Bear with me, and I apologize again. And there's the other item. We were told the provincial government directed the use of existing infrastructure. There's nothing existing there, it's an empty lot. $5 million to put up a building. They could have bought, I don't know, let's say 10 houses at $500,000 each around the city using existing infrastructure. Houses there, sewer and water, electricity, it's all there. Just make it available to these people that they're trying to look after. instead of one new building that's just a total monster disgrace, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, this was an R1 little subdivision, 6 simple little lots, 1 acre each, and now they've turned it into this monstrous development. I mean, what's annoying is the fact that now the city flipped the vote, so it should still be an R1 property. 1 house, 1 lot, that's the way the building code reads. I've been in construction my whole life, and I've never seen anything like this at all. I mean, and so, yeah. Anyways, that's, see where else we got here? Anyways, yeah, I mean, I'm gonna say the place looks like a jail. You'll sit there, look across the jail right across from me, and in summertime, at least it's all through, you can't see nothing. You know, I mean, it looks, you don't see anything, it's just like some nice bush across the road. Even though the jail's right there, I live on the same lake as the jail, you don't even see it. I don't know what's going on this year, they just did all their big improvements. And I've already been in contact with the jail saying, like, hopefully those lights that you've got shining all winter on everything are going to be pointing down on their own property and own parking lot, because they are blinding. And maybe the trees will cover those up, but I know right now, like I said, I've already talked to the jail, and they would look into it. So hopefully that's going to be done. Yeah. Anyways, the culverts are supposed to be 12-inch culverts with a burial of 12 inches over top, protruding 2 feet past each side of the bottom of the ditch. That's what's supposed to be there, and today there's none. The road, actually entrances are higher down the transmitter road, so the grader, when it's going by, plow. I mean, I would like to see the grader or those snow guys who are plowing end up in that field over there, because all of a sudden they got this big hump and the blade catches it and they lose control. Because sometimes they drive fast and push the snow back. So I wouldn't want to see an accident just over that. Anyways, to go a little further, this same developer did the units on Veterans Drive. Everybody knows the condos on Veterans Drive, there's supposed to be 8 of them. They asked the city for a change in R1 to R2, because this is, the same developer went from 8 condos, I don't know how many there, I've never gone around the back and counted, but it looks more than doubled in size again. Just like this property here we go again. Same thing, we start off with four little houses was supposed to be, turned into 2 duplexes, because they can't build on this little tiny lots and they're the ones who made them, the city just approved it. So, yeah. Anyways, yeah, I do think that those poor people who are going to be put in there, you're going to do more harm to them than good, because if all you need is one person to come there and all 40, because that's what I was told, it's going to accommodate 40 people. One person comes there, because they've already had murder in one of their buildings. So you have one person coming into that building, and how many, to me it affects them all. 40 more people who are already going through a traumatized situation in their lives, and they're going to be affected by how many other people are going to come there. It doesn't make any sense. Put them all in one, like I said, it looks like a jail. Anyways, I'm going to get to the end of this. To me, what I have is this. I have a boat that's turned over, don't know why. We have all this smoke and screen going on, and I got pages of stuff here from all this development, and I'm not going to use all of them. Lots, single lot. One more, the same, they show all the lots on this one. This one just has the small lot being, and this one is, again, showing the 4 lots being subdivided. These are from all 3 meetings that went on. And it was all to be looked after by the end of August 22nd, 2021. The mayor wanted that on his desk finished. So, yeah, anyways. I mean, now that everything has happened, it's done. They got the tent is gone, everything is done, right? I'm thinking the pony show's gone, smoke is all gone. Here's what we have. 12,000 square feet of building going up. And I've talked to everybody from the provincial government, and they told me to come and talk to you. So here I am. Start at the bottom and work my way up. And where I was also told is the people who came told me that, this shit's happened in January 1. I've worked construction my whole life. I know projects do not just start the day that the new year starts. They've been in the works maybe for a year, or it could be a couple of years. I don't know how long it takes to get funding and all the rest for this kind of a project. So it doesn't happen overnight. I'm totally aware of that. But these people think that, snap your fingers, we got it in January. Give me a break. Yeah. Anyways, I'm going to finish with, I think I will just start a chicken farm in my backyard, and never mind the city, because I don't seem to get anywhere with the city, and that's where I'm going to go with that. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken.
I can move to that one
Okay, moving on the agenda, West Siemens, multi-unit residential water rates.
I'm not as technical, so I just printed off a few. I don't know if you can pass it around. Sorry. Good go. Okay, good morning, Mayor and Council and City staff. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Wes Siemens, and I've been investing in apartment buildings in Kenora for over 15 years. I live in Keewatin with my wife and 2 teenage daughters who attend St. Thomas Aquinas High School. I'm here today to speak to you about how the change in billing formula brought in 3 years ago for multi-unit apartment buildings has affected this city. I wanted to first quickly review how we got to this new billing model and how it actually came to be. In approximately 2017, a condo building in Keewatin complained to the city council at the time that they had an individual water meters throughout their whole building. It was 30 units or something like that. They had 1 meter for each building. And as a result, each one of them was paying their own monthly meter charge throughout the units. And it's unusual because they were basically the only building that was done like this, or sorry, one of the only buildings that was done like this. And at the time, council had directed the operations manager or water department to look at this issue and come up with a solution. And what was proposed was, instead of changing the one problem building to a single meter, they decided to propose a billing model that charged every individual unit, apartment, or condo building a meter fee across the city of Kenora, even though in most cases these meters didn't exist. They also proposed water meters were supposed to be installed on each new apartment during construction. So on new buildings, they would be required to do that, which would have obviously added tens of thousands of dollars in unnecessary costs. And the most important thing is something that no other municipality in Canada requires. It doesn't exist. And I don't have time this morning to go through all the versions of what this bylaw from where it started to where we are, because it changed multiple times, mainly due to the poorly thought out planning with it, to be honest with you, in my opinion. At the beginning, this new charge was always referred to as a water meter fee. But after a while, it was called a water meter fee, but it was because there wasn't an actual water meter, they started calling it a multi-unit fee, because it wasn't actually in existence. It was a phantom charge, charging for something that wasn't in each building. City staff had conducted a survey at the time to get input from all the city residents as to what they thought about this issue. But when the results from the survey were against what was being proposed, they refused to release the survey findings. We had to put a Freedom of Information request in to get the results of this survey, which was paid for and funded by city tax dollars. And at the time, I even had the architect of this plan tell me that I was lucky that the city wasn't making me rip out all my plumbing to install individual meters. He's not around here anymore. One of the arguments made for the change in billing was that we needed to make the system fair. And to make it fair, everyone should pay the same amount because it's a user-pay system. The issue is the cost for the city to deliver water to one apartment building with 35 units versus delivering water to 35 individual homes. It's not even close to the same. There's hundreds, most likely actually thousands of feet of water main that would run between all the houses. There's 35 curb stop shutoffs in front of each house, and there would obviously be 35 actual water meters in those homes. When this new policy applied only to multi-unit buildings and not to hotels, not to nursing homes, not to industrial users, and not to the hospital, it showed what the real reason for doing this was. Target one segment of housing to raise funds to subsidize all the other users in the city. It's not the answer. The current billing model for multi-units that was adopted is to charge a per unit fee that's 50% is what they landed on, 50% of what a single family home would pay. So the meter fee on a single family home right now is approximately $100. I think it's $1 less or something, plus usage. And on an apartment in Kenora, it's $50 per unit plus the usage. The problem is, again, Kenora is the only municipality in Canada that bills water in this manner. As a result, multi-unit buildings in Kenora pay the highest water rates in the country, while detached homes and hotels pay comparable rates to other cities in our region. On the note that I had handed out, I've shared with you a comparison chart using the actual usage for one of my buildings on Cambrian Drive, Summit House Apartments. It has 35 units. In an average month, we use about 410 cubic meters of water. So using Kenora's 2023 water and sewer rates, our annual water bill for this whole year is going to be about $37,500. If you took a hotel building in Kenora, let's just go with a make-believe one with exactly the same amount of units, 35, and use the exact same amount of water, that hotel would pay $17,500 less than what I'm paying for my building. We're using the same water, same amount of units, different clientele, but I would argue it's the exact same dollar amount that it takes the city to supply that amount of water to that hotel as it does to my building, but I pay $17,000 more. Moreover, my tenants end up paying $17,000 more, ultimately. If my apartment building was in Thunder Bay, so the exact same building in Thunder Bay, I would pay $17,000 less in water and sewer costs. In Red Lake, it would be $15,000 less. Dryden would be $14,000 less. Ear Falls, $16,000 less. And by that example, you can look and see they're all in the same range or whatever. I'm not asking that we have to be the cheapest, but we can't be double. We're completely out of whack. Before this whole billing model came in, my building would pay about $250 per month for our actual meter cost, so $3,000 a year. $250 times 12, $3,000. After the new rate structure came into effect, my cost jumped to $21,000 per year. It's an $18,000 increase. It was phased in over 3 years, but it's still $18,000 more than what it was before. Another glaring example of this inequitable rate structure is the Kenora District Services Board. It started a building in Lakeside just a few months ago, 57 units. If they built that same building in Dryden, their water cost would be $34,000 cheaper per year to operate that building in Dryden for water than it is in Lakeside. Over the last few years, I've spoken with many individual investors. I go to a lot of real estate conferences and stuff like that across the country, and I've talked with a bunch of individual people. And when I explain how the city of Kenora bills water
and sewer, the consistent question I get is why on earth would a city do that? Why would a city target an industry that they're actually trying to get more of? There have been many unintended consequences of this policy. The biggest one is the added operational cost to new and existing developments. On a personal note, I own fewer apartment buildings today in Kenora than I did when this policy took effect in 2019. Since this came in, I've sold 3 buildings and invested that money into other cities and other projects. I've looked at some residential opportunities in Kenora, but I've decided to wait and see what this city council will do with their water rate policy. After the election last fall, I was very happy to see all the new faces on council, and I'm optimistic about this change and hope this council will support new development in this community. I'd warned the previous council that due to this new rate structure, that rents would rise dramatically in Kenora. Landlords in Ontario are only allowed to raise rents to existing tenants approximately 2% per year, and the provincial government decides from year to year what that actual number is. For example, during COVID, there was a year or 2 years we were allowed to raise it almost nothing, and then the last one before this year was 1.4%. It's supposed to be tied to inflation, even when inflation is 6, 7, 8%. Pick your number. It's not even close. And when every single sorry, I lost my spot here. Basically, we couldn't raise the rents at all at that point. This is why there's a huge spread in what some existing tenants pay for rent and what new tenants would pay moving into the same building. New tenants are paying to cover costs we can't recoup from existing tenants. The only way to moderate rents in Kenora is to increase the supply of rental accommodations. In order to do this, developers actually need to be able to build units and make a profit. New building projects need to be financially viable. It's great to see that the KDSB has some much needed housing projects around Kenora that are underway, but there's no way that that organization, and they'll tell you this if you ask them, they cannot fill all the needs for housing in our community. KDSB has a mandate to help provide affordable housing across northwestern Ontario, but why would a private developer choose to build in Kenora versus Dryden, Sioux Lookout, or other communities when the costs to operate are dramatically higher? It makes no sense. The cost of water is obviously not the only reason why we have a lack of new construction here. It's extremely expensive to develop land and property and maintain buildings in Kenora. Construction trades and taxes and insurance costs are very high. And obviously the city deals with this all the time, but insurance costs for apartment buildings have literally in the last 2 years have doubled for my buildings. 2 years ago I paid $9,000 for a premium, and now I'm paying $18,000 for a premium. It's the same building. But everything is very high, and all those costs are out of control of the people that are in this room. Water costs are the one item that people in this room can have control over, and they can bring those costs in line with other cities in the region, and it's in Kenora's best long-term interest to do so. My request to this council is to please review this issue and find a way to make Kenora competitive with other northwestern Ontario cities and towns. While I'm well aware of the infrastructure investment required for our water system, I am confident that by working together, we can come up with a new billing model that doesn't shift so much of this financial burden onto the multi-unit residents of Kenora, and they are, like I said before, they're ultimately the ones who will bear the cost on this. In the short term, people like me have to juggle it. In the long term, the rents rise when units turn over, and that's just the way it goes. There's no other way around that. A couple things I just wanted to add at the end here is, so over the last 3 or 4 years, I guess probably closer to, starting about 4 years ago, there's been multiple deputations made about this. I made 3. There's probably 8 or 10, I don't even know. I would encourage you, I'm assuming those are available somehow through the city. Most of that stuff still applies. The only difference is, and for those of the people that are in the room versus the last time you were in the room that made a deputation, this isn't this council's fault, but this group has the ability to fix this and to right a wrong. The tone was quite a bit different in some of my previous deputations, and the reason for that is, yeah, this isn't your fault, but it's got to look at. Otherwise, we're going to be sitting here 4 years from now, wondering why isn't anyone building in this town, and that's really what I think. Thank you for your time. That's all I have. I don't know if anyone has any questions or.
Councillor Van Bellingham?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Siemens, for your deputation. We have sort of unofficially talked about this, and just my fault because of figuring out procedure, I will be bringing a notice of motion at next council's meeting in order to get this on the agenda, because we need to have consensus at this table in order to direct staff. So
Sure.
I will be bringing this at council meeting on March 22nd.
Great, thank you.
Which will then show up on the April meeting, because that's the procedure.
That's our fault.
Yeah.
Councillor Vernon?
Yeah, thanks Wes for the information.
Sure.
You mentioned Summit House,
Yeah.
Cambridge Apartments. What other places do you own in town?
So I own a bunch. That's the biggest building I have. I own a bunch of other 4, 5, and 6 unit buildings, and so just around. They don't have names on the buildings. I own a bunch of stuff on 3rd Street, 4th Avenue North, and I also own the mobile home park on Bradford Lake as well.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Well, leave it with us, Wes.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks for your time.
No.
Yeah, we're done with deputation.
Just testing.
Yeah, you said.
The other one, he had to cancel, he was calling us. But he'll be maybe next month or next meeting or something.
What's your stuff?
We'll get it fixed.
Congratulations on your
Thanks, guys. Okay. We'll move on the agenda. We're into item E, reports. Item number 1, administration, finance, and human resources. 1.1, external salary survey, compensation review. Roberta, are you going to speak to
Yes.
this, or Kyle, or? Does that mean?
Yes,
first?
Roberta.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor and Council. This report, the purpose of this report is to provide feedback or update on the non-union salary grid. Before I get started, I just want to clarify who we're speaking about with non-union. There are 3 groups of employees that are included in our non-union employees. We have our professionals and managers that oversee delivery of our core city services. We also have, the second group is our museum staff, and the third group is our paid per call. So the impacts primarily focus on our professional managerial staff that service our core services. We did, however, also look at museum updates as well. So in accordance with our city policy, our salary administration policy, administration has performed an external salary survey to compare current salary levels for the City of Kenora manager and professional staff to the external market. Total compensation considers salary ranges, healthcare benefits, standard annual work hours of work, as well as performance metrics. Additionally to those regular total compensation types of elements, we also took a look at impacts of COVID and some of the trends that other municipalities are starting to see. 40 municipalities were across Ontario participated in the survey, and data was collected on all of these different factors. It's important to note that the data that was collected is based on 2021 salary information, and any annual economic adjustments to the management pay grid have not occurred until this report has come forward. So today the report stands that Council adopt the new City of Kenora Union salary grid that we, based on the research that was prepared and provided, that we streamline the grid to reflect 100 percentile of the midpoint to establish a midpoint as established by the external salary range, and that as a result, Council will direct administration to take those upgrades and administer salary in accordance with policy.
Questions of council? Councillor Benson?
Just a question. How much difference on the budget would it make if we deferred the implementation of this to July, September?
I wouldn't have that information right now. I'd have to take that away and understand what that impact would be.
Any other questions? Deputy Mayor Bernie, I'm going to just, if you could just take over chair of the meeting.
Sure.
I just wanted to make a comment about and do it properly. I'm kind of along the lines of Councillor Madsen, and that I'm not suggesting that this is not important for the city of Kenora. That's the last thing I'm saying. I'm looking at the reality of our budget this year. I don't know about other councillors and that, but I've been on the phone since the last meeting, and not having some very pleasant conversations with people about the fact that they're struggling also, and I understand that. But I've indicated that in these times, we have to look at some type of increase in that. You can't have inflation at 6 or 8% and having all your costs increase. We know what the effect of that is later on down the road. We're seeing it now with infrastructure and the neglect there. So, but I would support the recommendation if we looked at a July 1st or whatever it would be in that, but a minimum of July 1st, 2023 implementation. I know that's maybe not what some individuals are looking for, but that will go a long way and help us in our budget deliberations, because we're at the high range now, at the very high range in northwestern Ontario for tax increases, because I know it was brought up where they were talking, comparing to other municipalities, and we need to be cognizant of that for our taxpayers. That's why we were put here, is to look after the interests of ratepayers and taxpayers, and I can live with an implementation, but I cannot with January 1st, 2023. So I'm throwing it out there for support, because I know this will come back for a vote on March 22nd. So we can open it up for discussions. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So, thank you. So, there's been an argument made throughout this budget process that we cannot afford to increase compensation for staff, that we as members of this community cannot afford to pay a pay increase for these individuals, or that the compensation isn't a key decision around someone's career choice. I've already made my arguments around the current economic climate we are in and why I think it isn't prudent to assume that money isn't a motivating factor. And I want to speak to the affordability piece that you just brought up, Your Worship. So the province of Ontario has the second highest property tax rates in the country. The province of Ontario, the government of Ontario, also pays the least per capita in provincial spending dollars. They pay an average of $11,794 per capita versus a countrywide average of $13,754. Some examples of programs which are financed by provincial spending that are supported by the property tax bill in Ontario are paramedic services, social housing, social assistance, assistance to the aged, childcare, and public health services. Our operating budget currently has around $6 million of municipal tax going towards these programs. The compensation review that we are talking about has an increase of $395,410 for the year. So I asked this council how it can say that we cannot afford to pay a municipal staff a fair wage to do the job which municipalities are required to do when we can afford to give over $6 million of municipal tax dollars to subsidize health, social services, and ambulances, and other programs which fall within the jurisdiction of other governments. I hope that this council and our community will start to punch up going forward and cease continuing to punch down over and over again. Frankly, it's short-sighted and a lazy way to try and get a political win. I, for one, am not going to play politics with people's livelihoods and believe in fair wages for fair work, and that is why I've supported this compensation review from the beginning and will continue to work to pull this community up.
Thank you. Any other questions of council? Councillor Contra.
Thank you. I don't have a question, I guess. My comment is just that I feel just we need to really consider the balance between being an employer and being responsible to people who are ratepayers in the city. I think the ratepayers would be happy to see never an increase, myself included as a ratepayer. However, we have a responsibility to the people we employ if we want them to stay here and enjoy their lives here. And I feel like making sure we're paying them adequately is very important. I also would flag the conversations we've had around this year may be a little bit higher, but we're looking at lower increases projected for the next couple of years. And I think we can't lose sight of that.
Okay. Councillor Matson.
We are giving them, as far as I know by consensus, this is happening. All we're suggesting is to implement it a little later, just to help this year's budget a little.
Any other?
Yeah,
sorry, Councillor Byrne.
Yeah, I have a question. So you asked a question about, to Roberta, about how that would affect the tax levy. And we don't have that answer right now, do we?
No, because compensation is based on an individual, I'd have to go back and actually calculate for each individual to get that total.
Is that a big undertaking, Roberta? A large undertaking to have to do that?
I would be lying if I said it,
No.
it was easy,
Yeah,
but no,
for sure.
it is
Okay.
understanding each individual.
And again, it's not just to decrease the tax levy. That's not the sole reason for my question. I agree with everything our councillors have said. Mayor Poirier, Councillor Koch, Councillor Van Bellingham, he eloquently and passionately stated that. This is why we're here, to get to make these tough decisions. I think it's, personally, I would need some time to really roll this over in my mind. I mean, we've been talking about the compensation review for quite some time, but this scenario right now, as I said, there's arguments for both sides and reasons, valid reasons. So from my perspective, as I say, I would just like to contemplate that a bit, speak for myself. I don't want to belabor or stall the process, that being said. Thank you.
I'm just wondering if Heather could help support council just with the procedure around what that would look like if, an amended motion or whatever. Heather, if you could just walk council through that.
Sure. So should there be consensus today that council wants the resolution that's presented on the 22nd changed to July 1st, there would need to be consensus at the table today. I don't hear that. So what would be presented on the 22nd is the motion that's before you, which is in the recommendation, which is January 1st. So council has then until the 22nd to contemplate, decide what their position is. On the 22nd, you can present a motion to that amended motion to that motion, and introduce that at the table when the motion is called. So a member introduces the original, then a member can introduce an amendment to that motion, which would be a different date if that's what you're contemplating. And you would need a seconder And once there's a seconder, then it's debatable. So at that point in time, the other members of council can decide, do they wish to proceed with the amendment that's been presented? If they do not, and there's no support for that, it goes back to the original motion, which would be the January 1st, and the mayor would then call for the vote on that original motion. So my recommendation at this time would be proceed with the motion that's presented, January 1st. We're fortunate this month because we have an extra week in between to make your decision. And on the 22nd, if someone needs assistance with making an amendment, I can assist you with that.
Just a question.
Yeah, Councillor
Go ahead,
Bernie and then Councillor.
It's just quick, so this wouldn't jeopardize this initial motion? It
No,
would still be?
it gets presented on
Gotcha.
the council meeting just as it is today.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Moncrief.
I
and then-
didn't speak, thank you, I didn't speak because I like Councillor Bernie, I'm still chewing it in my mind, and, but I, as a compromise and as a, again, due to our lack of information, I would favor July 1st implementation. I don't think that says to staff that we value them any less. We are all in favor of the review and the changes to the grid. I just think we do have to balance a lot of things here, and and again, I'm gonna say it again, I don't feel I had enough information about the operating budget to determine any, with certainty that I am secure in what we're doing there, so I would favor July 1st.
Councillor, did you? Councillor Bernie, I'm going to ask you to take the chair
Sure.
again.
Go ahead.
So when I went back through all the data that we've been inundated with and presented over the last couple months, the last figure I saw on the compensation, on the implementation of this compensation review, and again, I'm just going by what my notes said, was 395,000 and change or whatever. So if you do a quick calculation, you take half of it, and whatever that works out as far as a decrease in the tax rate, that's to be determined in that. But what I'm wondering in that, just so we're not talking about this in May still, because we really need to get moving on to other things in New York. This is, and I know it's a new council and that, but I have never spent this much time on a budget, even when I was a newbie myself. We spent a lot of time on the capital budget. We spent time on this, and I know people are still getting their footing with regards to municipal finances and the taxation levels and everything that goes with it, and I appreciate that. And I was there too at one point. Like to me, I'm just wondering, like, what information, if staff are going back and looking at it, so people will have enough information to make a good decision, because that's at the end what we want to do. What would it be that we would leave with staff at this point in time? Like, they need to know. They can't just go back and guess. So I guess that's what I'm throwing out into the meeting here, and that. Can we give them, like, what information would someone, like yourself, Councillor Bernie, need to make that decision, or Councillor Moncrief? And if we can have a little chat about that, and then at least come to some consensus, what would be required for staff to provide prior to our next regular council meeting.
You're asking me?
Well, I'm throwing it out there because we can't just say something and we need to give specific direction to staff when we're going to ask for something. We can't just say, we want to change this. Like, what information would be pertinent to help people make a decision one way or the other? So.
Thanks, Mayor Poirier.
So you said the 385, was it 385?
Well, it was 395 and that, but I'm going off of my notes.
And yet Roberta said there was no number, so is the 395 10 divided by 12 months what the monthly cost?
No. I think what's important to note is the salary is individual. So depending on where someone is in the grid, we have to look at each individual and say what that cost will be. So it's not as easy as just dividing it in half. That's
But the
not the
calculation
process.
has to be done.
The calculation has
Has
to be
to be
redone. The other thing that I want to flag is we do have, we are continuing to recruit during this process. Our wages have been noted as under review. I can tell you right now, we have brought on a couple of individuals and we are still in active recruitment of some pretty significant roles. So those areas as well are factoring in the longer it goes on. So that's why there's not an amount. I'd have to go back and actually recalculate.
What I'm saying is you have to do that in order to implement
I would
this.
have to do that.
So it has to be done anyway.
It would have to be done to recalculate another number for July.
Right.
Yes.
So
January.
Mayor
That's right.
Poirier's question was, what would council need from staff? Councillor Manson has asked the question for that number, what that would be. So if there's 4 councillors that would like us to go back and recalculate that number, we can make an effort to do that over the next 2
I'm
weeks.
just curious.
So I don't know if we want to go around the table on that. Your worship.
Well, we still have a question, Councillor Van Bellen.
Is that feasible to be able to individually calculate this in a week, 2 weeks, I guess, including a spring break in between that?
I mean, the data, we do have the data. I can tell you that it has taken us over a year to gather, analyze, and to sort. 2 weeks is pretty tight because we are rerunning the numbers, clarifying, reviewing. So in terms of getting it for next council, I will endeavor to have that if that's the direction. But it is significant work.
Supplementary.
Yeah, so thank you, Your Worship. Can I ask maybe as a question, what number would the councillors who are looking to do a July implementation date, what number in regards to a tax level are you going to be comfortable with? Because what if they don't match?
Personally, I don't have a number in mind, Councillor. But I've been on the other end of this as well. I've worked and lived through Ray days. I've taken pay cuts when I've changed jobs. I've been smacked in the face with reality many times. So it's not necessarily about a number or a tax levy. It's just Mayor Poirier eloquently articulated this. We have an obligation to our taxpayers. This is not an easy decision by any stretch of the imagination. And personally, it doesn't. It doesn't devalue the work, the important work that's being done by our staff here at the City of Kenora. That's not what it is at all. But we're sitting in these seats to make tough decisions. So I think if we can save some money, I think and we can do it at a compromise, which I think that is. I think that's probably the wisest. It's a wise decision if we can do that, and not put anybody not make it, sort of spread that out there, make a decision that's a compromise for our community, for our employees. So that's where I'm at. So back to your question, an actual number, percentage as far as the tax levy is concerned is not as important to me as knowing that we're going to have a savings, and it's going to be passed on to the taxpayers, and not at a tremendous expense of our valued employees.
Okay. Councillor.
Yeah, with respect to Councillor Bernie's comments, also the other things that, people who've been around long enough have been through all of those things that you mentioned, as well as serious inflation and 18% mortgage rates and things that are absolutely beyond your control. And so what we can control and compromising a little bit on behalf of everyone in the city that pays taxes, I think would be a win for everyone. And again, we are supporting staff and we value what they do and understand that that their work is important, but I think we all need to face it together.
Okay, any other questions, Councillor Chase?
No question, just, I've been an advocate for this policy change for a lot of the reasons Councillor Van Bellingham had mentioned. But having this discussion this morning, it does sort of lead to having a second sober thought about the implementation of this policy. So I'm not decided yet in where I want to go. I want to give this some more thought. I didn't want to charge ahead originally with this policy and retroactive January 1st because I believe in compensating our staff, and to me the increase, we're going to see increases in taxes for a while, and I think the projections going forward, like Councillor Koch mentioned, is that they're not going to be as significant as this year's, and I, for one, being in this role, and I'm willing to have some tough conversations with constituents who are upset about the increase that we're looking at. But I think the level of service that they're going to get, especially in our term with the changes that administration is making, will be noticeable. There's going to be significant enhancements and investments that I think ratepayers are really going to start to see and really appreciate. And we heard it this morning, the deputation from Mr. Ames talking about his roads and the work being done on his roads this year and the change that he's seen. So obviously change is hard. I look at this as an investment in our community that we can all participate in. And is it going to be a tough pill to swallow for some individuals? Absolutely. Things are very expensive right now. So basically, I just want to make it clear to my colleagues, like I'm on the fence right now. I don't know what direction to go. This is a tough thing to do, and I appreciate all of your perspectives. And I think hopefully we will be able to compromise on something that works for everybody. Thank you.
So are we? I guess again we're back to if there's a majority of council that want staff to go back and flesh this other information out, then I think we need to determine that. Otherwise, staff isn't going back to, and there'll be a vote on this recommendation on the 22nd of March. So. Kind of maybe we'll just if you're okay with that, just go around the room and that, and oh sorry.
Sorry, before, can I ask, is there a way that this decision can be made for anyone who's on the fence without asking the extra work of staff?
Yeah, I personally don't need any additional information. I'm satisfied. I think it's just a matter of trying to cut as much cost as we can, and whatever that number ends up being will be a reduction in taxes. And that's the ultimate goal here, is to get the tax increase as much as possible. So for me, in terms of what I need, I really just need time to think about how I want to proceed and how I would vote on this and what comes forward.
I'm just going to say I agree.
Me too, I agree.
Okay. I think at some point in time, if the date changes from January 1st, there's going to still have to, there's still going to be a calculation because we're going to be passing a budget. So I don't know if that plays into what can be done on March 22nd, and that you want to make sure you're pretty close on your budget when we're passing it. So I don't know if you can get around it. If it does change or not. Like I don't know if the information still has to be forthcoming at some point. Am I correct? And
the only thing that I could commit to at this time is we'll sit down with our team and we will work through what we've heard from council today. Obviously we've talked about this issue a number of times. The conversation today has changed things a little bit, and we will. To Mayor Poirier's point, eventually you need to have a figure kind of nailed down in the budget, but at this point I would need to sit down with our team to determine how to move forward with the operating budget that'll be presented on March 22nd.
For my comfort level, I'd rather know what that number is. Yeah, so that's good. And the other thing is the option, if we leave it the way it is, the option would be defeat the motion, right?
Well, the option is to vote on the motion.
Right, and what I'm hearing is that none of us.
I don't know what the outcome would be, but the other option is to vote on that particular motion.
Right, and nobody's interested in defeating it, so.
Sorry?
We're not, it seems to be consensus that everyone is in favor of implementation at some point. So,
Well, yeah, I guess. I'm just going to be very cautious about how I would answer that question. But, like, does that provide enough information for staff to go back, or do we still need to flesh this out? Because are we going to be having the same conversation on the 22nd, or are we going to allow staff to know what they're looking at as far as a possible vote on the 22nd? So, I don't know. Councillor Manson?
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't think it matters what percentage it is. I think the perception is we're trying to be fiscally responsible, and we're doing what we can to find any way to do that, and I think this is an excellent way to do that.
I just want to state very clearly for the record that I don't think people's compensation is the correct way to do this. I think it's an easy thing for us to do at this table because we are the ones who have control over this, but these are also ratepayers whose income that we are giving them a 0% increase until January by making this, but till July by making this decision, who are also facing inflation. And I truly, truly, personally understand the implications of these tax increase levels. I know Councillor Manson pointed out that some of us have not been around in the 70s and 80s during inflation. Houses were also not $500,000. House prices were not an average of $350,000 back then. So I am personally aware of the affordability crisis that we are in this province. And I've spoken to about $6 million in this budget of dollars that we are mandated to pay that are not the city's jurisdiction. We're not public health. We're not, that's money that should be funded through our provincial government. Public health is a provincial government's mandate. So this is easy for us to do because it's easy for us to punch down. Like I said, these are the easy things for us to do because this is stuff within our control, because we are the ones who get to make the decisions, and it's harder for us to advocate at the other tables. But guess what? The federal government's going to punch down to the provincial government, the provincial government's going to pass it down to us, and we're going to pass it down to our staff, because that's what we can do, because that's the easy thing to do, and that's what we're going to keep doing. And I am vehemently opposed to this on principle, as I've said in my speech before. So I'm just going to leave it there. So I'm not in favor of this.
So, Your Worship, like I said, I would like to take this back with the Director of HR and the Director of Finance and the rest of the senior leadership team to understand how we can be prepared on March 22nd to pass the operating budget, because I hear you, Mayor Poirier, we do want to approve that and move on with that. Heather, I want to be clear, we do not have any direction regarding a resolution at this time, so the same resolution that initially was presented to council today will come forward. Yes. And I think that's an accurate description of the conversation that we had here today. And unless council has any more questions, I think we can move on to the next item, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Moving on to item 1.2, 2023 operating water and wastewater and solid waste utility budgets.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you very much. So this report's for the 2023 municipal operating budget, solid waste and water and wastewater utility budgets. Recommendation is that council approve the City of Tamar's 23 to 25 municipal operating budget, solid waste and water and wastewater utility budget as reviewed and amended. That in accordance with the notice bylaw number 160-2022, that council intends to formally adopt the 23 municipal operating budget, solid waste and water and wastewater utility budgets at its March 22nd council meeting. And further, the council authorizes city administration to proceed with the implementation of the budget-related decisions in accordance with those reflected in the amended budgets. So some background on the draft operating budget. The draft municipal operating budget was reviewed at special budget meeting held on February 2nd and further summarized on March 1st. The amendments to the original draft are as follows. Contribution to Kenora District Service Board for land ambulance services increased by the amount of $150,000 for 2023. Community safety well-being position and operating budget of $162,000 be included in the 23 budget. Addition of operating funding for sustainability committee of $75,000. Approved compensation review implementation of $395,000 for 2023 budget. Reserve contribution holidays of $316,000. Utilization of the tax write-off reserve, appropriation from reserve of $653,000 for 2023. And finally, a reduction in policing costs in the amount of $511,000. The resulting total additional requirements for 23 is 1.5 million or 5.36% increase from the 2022 budget tax levy. The draft budget maintains existing service levels. Some background on the draft solid waste utility budget. The draft solid waste utility budget and 5-year capital plan were reviewed with council at special budget meeting March 1st. It should be recognized that the draft budgets are based on maintaining existing service levels without any rate increases. The draft water and wastewater utility budgets, in accordance with the Safe Drinking Water Act, Council received the water and wastewater long-range financial plan on September 15th, 2020. One of the recommendations of the financial plan was to implement a 3.1% increase to water and sewer rates for 2021. Council did not act on that recommendation at that time. The plan was then amended to cancel the 21 increase, and the 3.1 annual increase remained for the term of 2022 to 2026. These increases would support the ongoing replacement of existing assets and beginning to address the infrastructure deficit and improve revenue stability. The budget 3.1% increase effective January 1st, 2023 is reflected in the 2023 water and sewer operating budget. Thank you.
Any questions of council? No? Okay. So this will be coming forth on the regular scheduled council meeting for March 22nd in whatever form it will come in. So I'm going to be careful what I say there. So moving on to item 1.3, electronic monitoring policy. Roberta, are
Yes. So this policy is coming forward as a result of changes to the Employment Standards Act, which occurred April 11th, where a new bill, Bill 88, was passed, implementing the Working for Workers Act 2022. The policy is geared to ensure that employers provide notice to employees in the manner in which we use electronic monitoring. It provides a description of how and in what circumstances the employer may electronically monitor employees, the purposes for which that information obtained through electronic monitoring may be used by the employer, and any other changes in terms of operation. I think it's important to note that the ESA changes do not affect or limit the employer's ability to use information obtained through the electronic monitoring of its employees in any ways that it sees fit. Just for council's information, the city of Kenora, like many municipalities, has a number of tools where we do capture information, data to support service delivery, to analyze, track, trend. These things range from, simple fob on a door When you scan in to our HRIS types of software, our links field, which is our vehicle, AVLs, cameras, etc. So there's lots of different data points that we collect information on. One, to improve services, and two, also to respond to any incidents, whether it's a customer service related concern that we need to look into, or incidents where there's theft or damage. So that is primarily the reasons right now why we use that data, and this policy spells out all of the different systems and tools that we today use and collect data relative to employees. It is also important to note that this policy is not exhaustive. As we bring on new systems or eliminate systems, it has general acknowledgement that the city will continue to move its operations. And so, thinking about how we best communicate that as those types of systems come on, really to our employees, which is the obligation under the policy.
Councillor Bellone?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have some comments. I guess it's very broad language, and it sort of seems like we can do whatever we want, whenever we want, however we want, and that gives me pause. So I just wonder, is this, the way that this is written, is this industry best practice, and how is this being communicated to staff, especially with things like maybe hybrid in office versus at home work now being more part of our normal working environments?
Yeah, excellent question. It's important to note that if we were ever to use this type of information, let's say in an employee performance situation, we would have to follow through our employment standards and under the Labor Relations Act or any collective agreement, we have to have reason to look. So these are not, this policy does not take away the employer's responsibility to handle the information collected in a specific way, to communicate how we are using it. There is no current practice right now where we are actively monitoring this data. This is more of when there is a question or an issue that comes to light, we refer to the data. So while the purpose of this policy is meant to be broad because it's meant to provide information as to all the different ways the employer collects or can track, it does not speak to the fact that, or eliminate the fact that the employer has to pass several tests before it uses that data. Some elements in terms of remote work and hybrid work, that is an important type of an aspect. And we know right now, in terms of our any remote work situation, we would be having ongoing conversations. And in fact, the leaders set those parameters to say, what are those regular touch points? How would that relationship work, and any specific expectations that would go back and forth. We don't presently use any tools right now to say, are you on? That's not the intention of that. So it's meant to be broad awareness, but it doesn't take away the employer's responsibility to handle the data.
Okay, any other questions of council? Okay, thank you, Rupert. That will come forth for a vote with a recommendation on our next council meeting. So moving on, item number 2, fire and emergency services, no reports. Item number 3, engineering infrastructure, we have 3 items. 3.1, 2022 Tamara drinking water system summary report.
Thank you very much. The first report here that we have to present includes a recommendation for council to hereby receive the 2022 Tamara drinking water system summary report for the period of January 1st to December 31st of last year. Give you some background information. The Ontario Regulation 170.03, the Safe Drinking Water Act 2002, requires that by March 31st of each year, or the previous year, we present a report that includes a summary of incidents or regulatory non-compliance and the corrective actions taken, and then also a summary of the actual flow rates through the water plant with a comparison against the actual plant capacity. And then further to that, we also had an audit completed by the MECP on April 15th of 2022, where we've received a compliance rating of 96.92%. There were 2 non-compliances identified in that inspection report, and those have been corrected at this stage. A little further information, very brief. We had a couple of temporary lines that had some testing for coliform or low chlorine residuals. They were temporary, and those issues were superchlorinated and corrected. We had some minor documentation errors for overall responsible operator and operator in charge of the water plant. That documentation in the logbooks has also been corrected. And just as a summary point, our plant is currently operating an average of 7,500 cubic meters of water throughput per day, which is about 28% of the plant capacity, so lots of capacity there.
Any, Councilor?
I just have a comment. I love this report. I love the details. I know it sounds weird, but I really do like it. And if you could pass along my gratitude to the staff person.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll get that done to Ryan.
I think it's great. Also, I wanted to ask the once per year management review, is that only done once a year because that's what's required, or is that what?
That is the requirement.
That's the requirement. Yeah. So the incidents of regulatory non-compliance section, item B, I just think that's a really positive outcome, and I wanted to commend staff for the increased interdepartmental communication at the commencement of a project to avert problems that may happen. I loved reading that in there. I think it's very positive, and congratulations to your team for doing that. Thanks, love it.
Any other questions before we move on to the next item? 3.2, I guess you're still up. So it's the management review information that Councilor Moncrief.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Nerd alert.
I love this stuff.
So the drinking water quality management standard contains 22 different elements, and element 15 of that is infrastructure maintenance, rehab, and renewal of the system. And so that requires that we submit to council and that you receive an annual report each year. And so, this report includes a summary of maintenance work, renewal projects, and additions to the system that have been completed over the course of last year, all part of the plan or implemented as required need.
Any questions of that report? This one wasn't as interesting as the first. I have to tell you. So, even so, it's a requirement, not so. Thanks. Any questions of item number 2, the management review? Okay, moving on to 3.3, infrastructure maintenance, rehabilitation, and renewal information.
Right, so element 20 of the same drinking water quality management standard requires that a management review, as you mentioned, is completed once per year, and that a report of the review and the corrective actions assigned are presented to council. And so this report is for council to receive the report, and I can give just a quick brief summary of some of the outcomes from the management review. There was some items identified where we could do additional training on Safe Drinking Water Act and associated regulations for an upcoming spring training session. The element 20 also needs to be updated just in the fact around procedure, that is the director of the department who is communicating the report to the CAO. There was one corrective action where we're looking at purchasing a backup generator for our Zone 1 standpipe. And then also arrangements for during construction periods that chlorine tests on temporary piping where there's bleeders are completed. And lastly, a couple minor standard operating procedures to be reviewed and revised if there are shortfalls or additions needed.
Any question? Councillor Koch?
Thank you. I just wanted to kind of echo what Councillor Moncrief said. I read these reports and mostly I don't know what a lot of it means, but I'm always left just feeling like everything is so well in hand, even if I don't necessarily know what is in hand. So just really, these teams doing all the dirty work are just doing such a great job. Thanks.
Yeah, that's great. That's great feedback. I'll bring that back to them. You know, over the last month, after touring through the plants and meeting the staff, I really feel like we have a real passionate team here. They're very proud of the work that they do, and they're terribly happy to be performing this work for the city and for the residents here. So it's a fantastic organization to have come into.
Thank you. Councillor?
I'm so excited about the tour. If it's scheduled on a day when I'm not available, I'm just gonna be mad.
I don't think you have sent out the invite yet, or
No,
Yeah,
not
I
yet.
haven't said
I'm
that.
weirdly excited about it. Nerd alert.
We'll make sure you can
Yeah.
it fits your schedule.
Thanks. Yay!
Let her dump some chlorine or something.
The teacher's pet. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, well, thanks, Greg.
Yeah.
Moving on, community services, no reports. Development services, there's 2 items, 5.1. Cal?
Good morning, everyone. Site plan control, or no, sorry, just had 2 reports here, make sure I get the right one first here. What we have here is the report that's coming before you today is to designate this property in question. So for the veteran councillor and mayor, you may remember there's a zoning amendment back at the end of 2021 where this property was rezoned to R3, high density residential. And as development has progressed, we now have a request from the developer to classify this as a class 4 noise area pursuant to the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks noise guidelines, NPC 300. So that is a designation that needs to come from the planning authority, so in this case the City of Kenora, and with no established method of doing so, some municipalities that see these more frequently will incorporate into noise bylaws or something like that. It can only be done by council. So that's why it's coming before you today. We have in support of this a preliminary noise impact assessment that was prepared by a local consultant for the developer in accordance with the guidelines, the NBC 300 guidelines. And basically what the class 4 designation will allow is for noise levels within the residences on this property to be 10 decibels louder during both daytime and nighttime hours. And that's specifically to the noise from the adjacent rail yard. The closest dwelling to the rail yard will be just 15 meters from the edge of the rail yard property boundary, and about 115 meters, give or take, from the closest rail line itself, where there will be trains moving. If this designation is approved, then it would still be incumbent on the engineer for the project and the designers of the dwellings on the property to ensure that they can meet those slightly greater than normal sound levels in those properties. And we are recommending that part of that approval be a condition that any purchasers or tenants of those properties be legally required to be notified, so that anybody moving into those dwellings will be fully aware of the noise and the fact that they may experience greater noise levels than might normally be expected in a residence elsewhere in the city.
Any questions? No? Thank you. I guess you're up again.
Yep. Okay, so the next item is amendments to our site plan control bylaw. What's really initiating
sorry.
our...
I'm
Sorry,
so
Oh,
sorry.
sorry.
I forgot I did have a question.
Okay.
There was a,
Councillor Van Bellen.
I'm sorry about that, thank you, your worship. On page 69, as Kenora has no established formal process for considering a class 4 designation or resolution as required from council, is there an efficiency that could be created here? Or is that the standard best practice to have council?
I'd say that's the default. In larger municipalities where these are more frequent, I did a little bit of a scan over what other municipalities are doing. Some have incorporated into their noise bylaw, for example, that there's a method to do it administratively. It's just without an established procedure like that. And it's something we do know there's other properties likely to come up in proximity to the rail line or the rail yard. For the foreseeable future, we have a line running right through the middle of town. So, but how frequently, it's hard to speculate. They allowed this class 4 designation since 2013 or 14, and this is the first time we've had a request. So, whether it's something administratively for us to consider, but I don't see an urgent need like you may see with other municipalities where they're seeing large-scale development in close proximity to rail corridors.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, moving on, 5.2, new site plan control bylaw.
Okay, yeah, so Bill 23, the More Homes Built Faster Act, was passed late last year, and one of the amendments that was made to the Planning Act that time was that no site plan control could be required on developments of 10 residential units or less. Now that overrides our site plan control bylaw, but I always like to aim for our bylaws to match up with provincial legislation, just for anybody that's looking at the bylaw and not aware that there's overriding legislation. So that's really what instigated the need to amend the site plan control bylaw. At the same time, we'd recently reviewed the bylaw just to look at areas in which we might reduce some unnecessary requirements for site plan control and some challenges that were being faced by some of our developers. And so what I'm also proposing at the same time is to remove some requirements from site plan control in areas where we don't deem there to be any advantage to this or benefit to the city in requiring site plan control. So those would be from non-residential development outside of the settlement area, from daycare centers, and from municipally owned land on Tunnel Island. And we're just confident in all those cases that other administrative and planning approvals are sufficient to address any concerns that we might feasibly have with situations where there's development in those areas. Now, with the removal of site plan control approval from areas outside of our urban area, we will be maintaining it for development on or adjacent to areas of environmental concerns. So one of the biggest ones in our municipality is Black Sturgeon Lake and all the shoreline properties on Black Sturgeon Lake. So we are maintaining the section of the bylaw that addresses the need for site plan control in those areas. And finally, we're a couple of just administrative changes to reflect who's administering the bylaw on behalf of the city. So our chief building official hasn't been involved administratively in those, though he's certainly consulted and has a voice in the review. And also the calculation of financial securities to give us some discretion. So for example, some developers that maybe undertaking a range of projects in the city, we may be able to explore ways of centralizing the security and maybe reducing some of our security costs, where balancing out getting enough security to ensure that municipal interests can be addressed if they come up, without unnecessarily burdening a developer with multiple securities that may be unnecessary.
Okay, any questions? Councillor Moncrief.
Is this, I'm just curious about why now and why not during the official plan and zoning bylaw review?
So it's a separate document. I'd expect that some of the things behind, some of the concerns behind some of these amendments, you might reasonably expect to see incorporated in our policies of the official plan. There's nothing in these amendments that I see that goes contrary to the recommendations of any of our official plan policies as they currently stand. And we fully expect that, the official plan, as you know, is unfortunately on pause right now, the review, but we're hoping we can reinitiate the project or restart, get the project going again during 2023, and there will be ample opportunities for public consultation. And it may be, I think getting the official plan completed by the end of 2023 is probably my most optimistic suggestion. And if there's any policy changes that affect site plan control, we'd probably be looking at those with further amendments in 2024.
Councillor Van Bellingham?
Thank you. May I ask if you generally know of how many times we use site plan control for buildings that are less than 10 units, residential? Like, is it something that we use often to begin with, or?
Well, it's something I'm required under the current bylaw for anything greater than 4 units,
Right.
or 4 units or greater. I wouldn't want to try to come up with the absolute numbers off the top of my head, but I can say that there, in the almost 3 years I've been here, there have been multiple properties that would fall between that 4 and 10 units. A lot of our residential developments, even if you have multiple duplexes or triplexes, as soon as there's more than 10 units on a property, that it would still be triggered. And anything major, there tends to be significant municipal concerns around servicing and things like that.
Sorry, as a follow-up, I think I'm just thinking about, Councillor Gurney always talks about like septet, and we sort of lose control of that in some of the, it's not a question, it's just a comment, I guess. This legislation feels like one of those ones where it was really specific for one area, and then it has these broad implications across the whole province that I don't know if are necessarily fully fleshed out. And for us little people.
Well, for something like, for example, it's mixed use, like you'd often see in our central areas of the city where SEPTED becomes, our Harbour Town Centre is probably where we're most concerned about principles of SEPTED. And in most of the developments you'll see down here are going to be mixed use, so even if there's less than 10 dwelling units, there would be a commercial component, and therefore site plan control would still be required. And that's actually what we generally encourage in downtown areas, is ground floor commercial with residential above. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Thanks. So just under development service, just a reminder that at noon today we have a zoning bylaw amendment meeting. At noon today. Next meeting Wednesday, April 12th, 2023. And could I have resolution number 2, please?
Oh, somebody's.
Oh.
Yeah. I usually let it out, but it felt
I guess we don't want to adjourn to another meeting.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move resolution number 2, seconded by Councillor Van Bellingham, that pursuant to section 239 of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended, authorization is hereby given for committee to move into a closed session at 11:01 a.m. to discuss items pertaining to the following. 1, personal matter about an identifiable individual.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Carried. bet you they have good baking at that.
That document is in depth like that.
All right, we're live again.
Okay, so is there a motion coming out of?
So the recommendation from closed session is that council hereby appoints Mayor Andrew Poirier with alternate Councillor Bob Burney to the Kenora Age Friendly Committee for a term of November 14th, 2026 at the pleasure of council. Okay, so that'll come forward to the March 22nd council meeting.
Okay. If there's nothing else, then we'll call for adjournment. Oh,
I just have one thing. I was asked by a group to bring forward an initiative starting in town, and today's the day they wanted it brought forward because it's International Women's Day. It's called Women Helping Women. It's an initiative called 100 Kenora Women Who Care, and it'll be a collaboration of local women with one goal in mind: to make a meaningful impact on the community. The original idea of the initiative came from the 100 Who Care Alliance, which supports dozens of chapters across the country. Each chapter raised $10,000 in one evening to donate to a predetermined registered charity. This year, the charity of choice for this group is Triple Play, to further mental health education and workshops for young women in sport. The co-chairs are Kim Leduc and Casey Pica. The ladies of council have all been invited to participate as well. If anyone in the community is interested in being involved in this, they're encouraged to reach out to Kim or Casey to help with this initiative. So I just wanted to introduce that.
great, thank you. Then I'll call for adjournment at 11:10 a.m.
Yep, we're adjourned.
This is a record for this meeting. Remember getting on